Hi, everybody. Welcome to this latest episode of Real Talk with Rick, our podcast, all things Eden Prairie. So I have a guest on this episode who is all Eden Prairie all the time. Dave Lindahl, who's the Eden Prairie Economic Development Manager, was for all practical purposes born and raised and spent his entire life mostly in Eden Prairie. I guess you'll hear in the podcast about a couple years he spent outside of the country. But Dave is our economic development manager, and he has been our housing manager, and he worked in the planning department. So he has a lot of history with the city, and he's going to talk about some of the early days of Eden Prairie development, actually even pre-Eden Prairie development as a kid growing up here, and then later on working for the city in planning and housing and now economic development. Dave also is a proud member of a cover band, Wonder Cure, which plays in and around the Eden Prairie area. So you get to hear about his early love of music and playing music and how that didn't become his career. Working for the city became his career. But he's got some good insights on economic development and his time in Eden Prairie. So here is my conversation with Dave Lindahl. Dave Lindahl, welcome.
Good to be here.
Yes, good to have you. Dave, you are, as I mentioned in the introduction, the Eden Prairie Economic Development Manager.
Yes, I am.
What does that mean?
It depends on who asks and what you want to hear.
What you want to hear, yeah, what happens. Well,
it means a lot of things. It's development, it's infrastructure support, it's real estate, I've done so many different projects, and you get to hear about them today.
Yes.
And I think once we get through this, people will know what economic development means.
I like that. That's a teaser.
It's a teaser.
You got to listen.
Yeah, to me, yeah. I mean, a couple of words about what I do doesn't work.
No, especially during your performance review.
No, then a few words is really important.
I thought it's if there's a lot of development and jobs in the city, the mayor and city council get the credit, but if there aren't, you're in trouble?
No, I get the bonus.
Okay, you do. Okay,
there are no
bonuses.
No bonuses.
No, I'm
just
kidding. But we will.
I'm hinting. I'm not kidding.
You're not. Yeah, right. What's also interesting that I mentioned in the introduction is that you're EP raised your whole life here. I always tell people when I talk about you, you're like the EP guy through and through from high school all the way to this day.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few of us here, I think, that work for the city that have been here for many years. But I mean, actually way before high school.
Yeah, well, talk about that. When did you come here? I know your parents are from Greater Minnesota.
Yeah, my parents are from Benson, Minnesota. So, for a lot of people that grew up in small towns, had to leave to find work, came to the cities. My parents did the same thing. My dad came down. They moved to Minneapolis initially, and then they moved to Bloomington.
What year is this? When is this?
Oh, they moved to. Well, here's the story. Actually, they moved to Eden Prairie in 1950, and they heard about a house that was for rent from a friend of theirs from Benson who lived in Eden Prairie on Duck Lake Road. He was like the only house on Duck Lake Road, and there's a house that's still there today, right in the corner of Town Line and Duck Lake, that they rented. And it was a great story because my mom said it was pouring rain. My parents had used my mom's dad's car. He didn't want to let them use it, and she said everything got soaked. They got there like 4 a.m. She said it was a nightmare. But when they finally got there and moved in, that was their first taste of Eden Prairie. They didn't know anything about Eden Prairie. I mean, at that point in 1950, Eden Prairie probably had 1,500 people.
1,500 people, probably mainly almost a township.
Yeah,
barely an incorporated city.
It was not. It wasn't even a village until 1964. So township. Yeah. So, because I always asked, why Eden Prairie? And they're like, well, we kind of exposed to Eden Prairie back in 1950. So they didn't rent long. They ended up in Minneapolis, and then they moved and built their first little house in Bloomington. Bloomington was exploding in the 50s and early 60s.
Post-war.
And so they bought one of those little post-war, probably a 1,500 square foot house. It was small. And that's where I was born. But yet, we were growing. I was the third child of six boys, and my mom was pregnant, and they knew they had to build a bigger house. And so then they had another connection to a Benson guy who was a builder who was building in Eden Prairie.
Wow.
And so they were like, yeah, Eden Prairie. We were there years ago. So they came out and looked at the neighborhood, which actually is right across the street from this building. And it was at that point, there's probably like only 4 or 5 houses built. But so they had a guy build a house for us in 1963. We actually rented, because it wasn't done, we rented a house over by Flying Cloud Airport in late 62. And believe it or not, I remember that. I was really young, but I remember a little bit of that. I remember, it's kind of weird. Guy across the street had a Formula car. And I mean, as like a 3-year-old kid, I remember I would just be over that. I'd be petting the slicks on the tires. It was just, but anyway, the spring of 1963, we moved into our brand new house in Eden Prairie, and it seemed like a mansion. I mean, it was probably 2,500 square feet, but it was, big from what we moved out of. And that was the beginning of the story of Eden Prairie and Dave Lindahl. I mean, it was. I would say that. I had an unbelievable childhood. I mean, it was a lot of fun growing up here because it was a very wild place. I mean, there was our neighborhood grew. I mean, at the same time we moved in, there was probably like 8 others that moved in and had lots of kids. So right away, you're meeting a lot of kids and friends and making friends and riding bikes and running across the road to areas like this, which are farm fields or woods and creeks. And so, yeah, it was just a blast. And yeah, so I feel privileged and lucky that I grew up here. Did I ever think I was going to come back here or work here? Not in a million years.
Yeah.
But I will say this. I liked it so much that, I mean, I was one of these guys that didn't want to see anything change. You know what I mean? I was like, the way it was is the way I wanted it to stay. Yeah.
Right.
I was kind of anti-development. I mean, I will admit, and hopefully the statute of limitations will run out on this, but I pulled a few survey stakes back in the day.
Sure.
Because really, we were just like, of course, we were playing sword fights with them, and that was part of the motivation. But, I remember when they were staking out to do a development up by Red Rock, and we were just like, no way, this can't happen. This is our property.
Well, this is good training for you because there's quite a bit of NIMBYism that goes on, and you were one of the first NIMBY people there was.
No, I was a banana, built absolutely nothing anywhere near anybody. No,
there you
no,
go.
I was not.
Not in my backyard to banana.
But no, it's funny that fast forward, I go to college and I'm not really sure what I want to do. But I take this class, and it's like whatever, the first year class called Intro to the Cities, and it was really fascinating, provocative, great prof. I mean, it was.
So where is this?
Oh, Mankato State.
Mankato State.
I'm going to jump around here a little bit, but it was just ironic that at the end of the day, I end up in a business about growth and development. But that was part of my motivation. I was like, it's going to happen, right?
Right.
So now it's like, let's see if we can help influence how it happens so that it's done in a way that's great for everyone for many years. So anyway, but to back up the story a little bit, so yeah, I graduated from Eden Prairie High School in 1977, and
I think I've seen you.
Oh yeah,
I've seen you. Yeah,
you haven't seen me. You've promoted me. You've actually promoted my photo at a number of events, and I didn't know that until I saw it. Like, I don't know, 5 events down the road, but no, that was my high school graduation picture. And yes, we did wear our hair long.
You did. Well, I was inspired by seeing you in Dazed and Confused and Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
You know what?
That was you.
You sound like my kids now, and they're like, "Dad, I know that was you."
That was you. Yeah, that was you.
Believe it or not, I got a haircut for that photo.
I believe
my hair was a lot longer.
I believe it. Yeah. And I think what you're referring to is I did a couple State of the City presentations where I talked about Southwest Light Rail Transit or Light Rail Transit coming to Eden Prairie, and the discussions began in the late 70s. So I show a picture of your high school graduation, and I show a little bit about the discussion of light rail that's been 40 plus years in the making. So that's what that refers to. But you were absolutely a child of the 70s, in the late 70s EP.
Yeah. And so, as you know, and I think a lot of people know, I still dabble with music, and I'm in a little cover band and have been for years. Well, taking that back to like 8th grade, I mean, that's when I had my first little band. when the girls rushed the stage.
That's why you had the band.
No, that's why I thought I was going to be a rock star.
Yeah.
I mean, I literally, when I graduated from high school, I was thinking I was going to be a full-time musician, honestly.
I believe you.
So I didn't attend college till like 2 years out of high school because I had this dream. I really did, that I was going to be a rock star. And I think I made the right decision to get an education.
Yeah.
Not that, I mean, I think what I figured out right away is that, I played in bars and stuff. I'm like, this isn't necessarily a great lifestyle. And then I went to Europe.
A lot of late nights.
Well, smoky late nights, yeah. And then I went to Europe. I saved up some money and went to Europe with a good friend of mine who dropped out of college his first year. And we traveled everywhere. And, God, that was a major motivator for me to get an education. Because I remember everyone we ran into and would travel with from wherever it was were in college. Yeah. Except for me. And I remember just thinking, I've got to get back and get after it. So I did. As soon as I got home, I was enrolled within like 6 months.
But right after graduation, you were thinking, I want to try the music. Did you go right to Europe, or were you doing stuff around
No,
here?
I was working. I actually worked. I was painting. I was
Okay.
a house painter. I worked for Dennis Wittenberg, who was a great mentor to me. Great guy. His wife did a lot of work with the EP Historical Society, Marie Wittenberg. But no, Dennis was a great guy. So no, I made decent money, and I was able to save and go to Europe. But when I came back, I basically said, and he was not surprised. And actually, he encouraged me to go to school. But I just said, I'm going to phase out of this and get into school and figure out what I'm going to do.
And we'll get
when I grow up.
When you grow up, and we'll get back to the current incarnation of your cover band. But did you say back in 8th grade through high school and even after that, were you guys a cover band as well?
Yeah, not the same guys, but yeah, we had, I had this little band and started in 8th grade. And God, I'm just forgetting the name because I can see a picture of us up in a tree that we did. But no, we used to and I tell you what, John Lindahl, who was our principal at the time, he came to Eden Prairie in 73, and everybody thought he was my dad, and of course he wasn't, but sometimes he was to help me get out of some pinches.
Yeah.
No, but he was a great guy. He would actually go up on weekends. We'd practice on Saturday, and he would open the school, and they had one little PA speaker that they bought, which I just thought was just unreal, And that was like it. He would let us use that, and we'd practice up in the cafeteria, and we'd open the windows, hoping people would hear us, so that the girls would show up.
Sure.
And they did.
Yeah. You keep talking about the girls. The girls showing up. I feel like that's why the band was formed.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's maybe still why I play. I don't know.
Well, yeah, your wife is at the show.
Yeah, no, not all of them.
So you go to Mankato.
Yeah, so I went to Mankato, and I took this class, which, by the way, it was fascinating, but I didn't really think about it too much after that. So I'm in my 3rd year working towards a history major because I love history. I did well in the classes, and it was fascinating. But I had that epiphany of what exactly am I going to do with my history major?
Right.
And I could not, actually, epiphany is probably not the right word. It was just like I had no idea. So
Panic. Panic.
Well, yeah, very worrisome.
Yeah.
So the epiphany was thinking back to that class I took and thinking, you know what, I've always been fascinated with real estate and development and city growth, and that class was so cool. I'm going down to the Urban and Regional Studies Institute at the college, and I'm going to meet with the provost or whatever what he was called, and just check this out. So I go in his office. We spent about an hour and a half. I walked out, signed up. I mean, he just laid out what I had to do, all the credits I needed to get and obtain, and all the classes I needed to take, and never looked back. But of course, looking back, I mean, I think of all the friends I had that had the same degrees. I think I'm the only one that really got into planning. And used, as a part of my career.
Well, if you look back at that time, because I talked to a city manager here, previous city manager, current Edina city manager, about this idea that there really weren't degrees for what we do, city management. There is some for planning and urban development, but even for you, it's not a super common thing. And even, you joke about what do you do with a history degree, my dad got a history degree, and what did he do? He sold paper in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
So he got into sales.
No, a lot of very successful people had history degrees, but I just
real estate, sales.
But at
whatever.
that point, I was just like, I had no clue, and so it was helpful then to kind of have an idea of what I wanted to do.
Sure.
So at this time, this is like early 80s, 82, 83. The economy is not great at all. I mean, interest rates were as high as 18%. I think on my student loans, they were in the low teens.
Right.
Can you believe that?
Right.
Compared to now.
Yeah.
I mean, it was bad. But so I was thinking a lot of the growth was happening in the Phoenix area and Southwest U.S. That's where I thought I was going to end up. But I came up here. I needed an internship to graduate. I needed at least a 6-month internship, and I was ready to send out resumes to all the kind of growing suburbs. First one went to Eden Prairie, obviously.
Sure.
And I actually called, and the city planner at the time, Chris Inger, said, "Oh, perfect time." And he goes, "Come on up here and talk to me." So we talked, and he goes, "You're in." He goes, "You're my guy." He goes, if it works out, he goes, "I think I'm working on getting a position approved so that you could start next year." And so that's really how it worked.
And they were hiring. They were looking for interns, full-time work.
In 1985, I mean, things were just starting to launch like a rocket, honestly. I mean, it was just really they were so busy with new development, but yet there was still a lot of fundamental planning that still needed to be done, and that's some of the stuff that I worked on. So yeah, all of a sudden, boom, I'm doing it, and a lot of the work that they weren't able to get after at that point was doing a lot of forecasting and kind of preparing for the growth and making sure pipes are sized right, the interceptors, and roads are, we have enough roads. So a lot of what I did the first few years of my career here, once I was hired, was taking all this data on growth, because we were growing really rapidly. The Met Council was basically saying, yeah, we don't really see it. We're making our major investments in Egan and other areas of the metro area. And Eden Prairie is like, no, it's happening. It's going to happen. We're going to need roads. We're going to need sewer interceptors. And we're going to need the metropolitan urban service area line moved. And so that's what I spent a lot of my first 5-6 years of my work here doing. Those two major Muciline expansions were very challenging because, you had to convince them, number one, that you had enough growth that, where you could substantiate moving it and allowing the growth to happen. But then they would hook you and say, oh, and by the way, you need to get your transportation chapter up to the speed. And I mean, it was very challenging, but fun.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot.
And in terms of Muciline, too, explaining that, where there's this line that's drawn where the Met Council would say, we will extend out and allow sewer and water and not septic systems. So the city had to work with them in terms of that line moving, so
exactly.
You can have sewer and water for new houses.
It's an invisible line that it's a way to kind of contain growth and to manage orderly growth and to prevent leapfrog development. That's really what it was. Anything out this Muciline had to develop at like 1 unit per 10 acres to prevent that sprawl. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. A lot of forecasting, a lot of population forecasting I was doing. So it was actually perfect for a guy coming out of college. So I learned a lot. And the thing I'm just thinking of as we're talking about this, computers. I mean, computers were not anything like they are today. No. There was one guy at the city that was learning, that knew VisiCalc in finance, and he actually taught me that program, which is like Excel. It's an electronic spreadsheet. And that's what I used to put together all these population forecasting models, which was really cool. But yeah, so it was also, I mean, I dabbled with computers back then at Mankato, but they weren't a major part of anything.
No, it was.
They had an apple orchard, as they called it, a bunch of Apple computers.
Yeah. But it might be if you know the certain languages, but there wasn't major mapping software. No. There wasn't. Everything was still done on paper.
Exactly. And they weren't that easy to use. DOS, did you ever have to use DOS?
Yeah, MS-DOS.
MS-DOS. I mean, they were, but yet that was all fun, and it was kind of cutting edge because, I mean, computers were becoming a major force within our work. And I saw that happen. Thinking back, that's kind of cool because now, I mean, it's so different now. It really is. I mean, so much obviously was done on paper and done old school, and
there wasn't internet, there wasn't email.
No, there wasn't.
Even when you talk of, and this is for me coming in the early '90s, word processing was a huge deal. Just to have word processing and some spreadsheets like you're talking about.
That
with
was
Excel.
this building we're in was a word processing company.
Right.
Yeah, that's what. And that, so that was a big deal. So if we'll just keep clipping along here about kind of things that we're having. So, so we were doing a lot of comprehensive planning. That's really what it was. Those first 5 years, and then I ended up with a title called HRA Manager, Housing Redevelopment Authority Manager, and started focusing more on housing and affordable housing and managing the CDBG Community Development Block Grant Program, which is a federal program. The city would get money every year, and we still do. And there's certain things you could do with that money, and there was a process and hearings and a lot of paperwork and administration. But it was fun and made a big difference. So that the housing years were some of the most rewarding parts of my career, I would say, because I was involved in a lot of projects where pretty much every apartment project that would come through the door, we would say, we want 20% of your units to be affordable, and we will make you whole because the rents are lower with the tax increment district. And most of the developers said, fine. So Bluffs at 9 Mile Creek, Purgatory Creek Townhomes, Columbine Townhomes, Summit Place, Senior, the Colony Seniors. There's others, too, I'm probably forgetting. And at that very same time, Eden Prairie and a lot of the suburbs around the metro area were really feeling the pressure to do more for affordable housing. Mm-hmm. Myron Orfield was a legislator at the time that was really kind of coming down on this idea that we need to deconcentrate and move, all the public and Section 8 housing in Minneapolis needs to be scattered throughout the area. And he had a bill that actually got to the governor's desk, Arnie Carlson at the time, that would have mandated that we had to do affordable housing, and he vetoed it. But he basically looked at everyone and said, well, listen, Met Council, cities need to be stepping up and doing more. If it can be done with carrots versus sticks, that's fine, but let's figure out how to do it. And that's where the Met Council got more. But so I kind of was working through that period, and it was great in a way because it really caused Eden Prairie to kind of look back at, okay, what are our housing goals and what have we done? And I was so impressed when I looked back because I looked at, they had a task force back in the early 70s, a housing task force, 15, 20 residents, not unlike what we're starting to do right now.
Yeah, got one going right now.
Stanley, yeah. And it was just great. I read all the minutes, and it was like really what they came up with. They said, we want to be a community that has an assortment of housing options for people. We don't want to be all single family. We want to be single family apartments, townhouses, condos, twin homes, triplexes, whatever. We want to be able to accommodate a lot of different lifestyles. That was their goal, including some affordability and including high end and everything in between.
And mix it into developments, right?
And mix it into development through PUDs. And I was just like, we don't need, these goals are still absolutely valid and good. We just need to create more action plans around how do we make that happen. And actually, the market made that happen. I would say 99% of the time it made it happen. What you see at Eden Prairie today was a comprehensive plan that it designated all these areas for this, high density, low density, medium density, and the market kind of filled in the gaps. What wasn't happening is the real affordable piece. And that's where I think, the city still to this day and the state and the Met Council and the federal government, need to pitch in and figure out how to get more affordable housing. But that was a rewarding time because you're, obviously you're helping people in need. Let me tell you a quick story. Back then in the, so we're talking 90s now, the two Section 8 projects we had in Eden Prairie, one was called Windsong, now it's Prairie Meadows, and the other was Briar Hill. They had 5 to 10 year waiting lists to get in. And the council was really frustrated by that. They were like, what can we do? So we formed this little, we didn't call it a task force, but it more or less was. And it had council members, it had planning commission members, it had some park commission members, it had, I was the primary staff person. And we came up with this idea. This idea emerged that said, okay, what if we were to take Section 8 vouchers that are portable, if the Met Council would give us priority, because the Met Council has a long waiting list for these Section 8 vouchers. People want them. A voucher allows you to live in any apartment project and have your rent subsidized. We went and interviewed some of the primarily, and let me back up a little bit. I'd say the typical profile of a person living in those apartments at that time was a single mother with children on welfare. And we asked them, how do you like living here? And most of them said, we hate it. And we were like, why? Because we're stigmatized. people know that that we're poor. And we were like, well, if we had a Section 8 voucher and allowed you to move into any apartment, mark rate apartment, you'd just be invisible. Would you like that? They said, we would die for that. So we said, well, what if you committed to a 5-year plan to become self-sufficient? You got hooked up with a mentor family from Eden Prairie and agreed to meet with them periodically, and then met with a case manager that kind of helps you through all this, create a 5-year plan to get you to self-sufficiency. They said, absolutely. So we created this program called the HOPE program, Housing, Opportunities, Partnerships, and Education. And we don't have time to get into all the details, but it all came together, and it was just amazing. And probably the most amazing part was, I remember the first night we had a meeting to call in residents interested in being mentors. I think 40 people showed up. It was amazing.
That's great.
And it changed their lives. The relationships they end up having with some of these people almost changed their lives. I mean, they would get emotional about it when we talk about it later. It worked. It really did. It really worked. And so looking back, and I'm glad when you said you're kind of preparing for this discussion, think about some of the things. I forgot about that program.
Sure.
And it was really great. It helped a lot of people. But
it's
anyway.
a huge part of housing, and you talked about the 70s. I mean, here we are, almost to 2020, and housing's still a major issue.
Always
just
will be,
variety
probably.
of housing, our housing. I mean, it's starting to age, even though a lot of it came in the 80s and 90s. So we still have to be on top of this. But it's no different than when you first came.
Exactly.
So we still have those same goals.
So I've always had an interest in real estate. In fact, I thought when I got out of college, that's what I was going to do. I interviewed with a couple different real estate development companies. So I was always thinking I'm going to jump ship at some point. But what ended up happening is my job title changed. I became the economic development manager with a big focus on real estate and development. And that was kind of the next phase of my career, which I've been doing since 2002 or 3. And, I've had so much fun doing it. Now, obviously, you're not making the same kind of money it would be if you're in the private sector. But in terms of the deals, the challenge, it's been a lot of fun. And So
in terms of the real estate deals, then what are some of the ones that jump out to you? What do you remember working on here in Eden Prairie?
Well, there's a lot of them, but we did a lot of land sales back then. So we had a police headquarters facility that is now Lone Oak Center, located right at Mitchell Road, and basically, well, they were growing out of that space. And when we bought this building, the plan was to move them into this building and consolidate a lot of our operations into this nice new big space. Then we had that real estate sitting there. So that was one of them. And I could spend an hour telling you just about the different projects that we vetted that never happened, hotels that were approved, didn't get built. The poor guy that got it entitled and was going to build it, bought a horse and buggy because he was into that kind of thing out in Victoria, brought it back to Indiana where he lived. It was killed riding it.
Oh,
crashed into a
my
tree.
God.
I mean, that is not funny. It was very sad, but just the circumstance was just bizarre, and it didn't get built, and that's why the family was never able to get it off the ground. Long story short, we waited and got the development that you see today, which is just wonderful. Land sales. We've done a lot of them. Columbine, over on Columbine and Prairie Center Drive, where the CVS is.
Yeah.
Well, that was about 4 acres of residual property that the city had purchased primarily to build Columbine Drive. So we were trying to sell that, and we were looking at condos, mid-rise condos, and all these. And then Pres Homes came along and said, we're going to redevelop our property, and we would love to have that as part of our assembly. And we said, that's fantastic. I mean, once we heard what their plan was going to look like, we thought, yeah, we'll do that. So we ended up selling that property to Pres Homes. Probably one of the bigger deals we worked on is we purchased 21 acres from John Tiemann, who owned a lot of land in Eden Prairie around the mall, which basically today is Bachman's. It is Water Tower Apartments, which is now called Arrive.
Right, on Singletree.
On Singletree.
Right.
So all the way up the road on the north side, basically we purchased that 21 acres, and we did that.
And it was what at the time when
it was vacant land.
Okay.
It was vacant property, and the city council was nervous that we had a Walmart that was just going in across the street. They wanted to build Sam's wholesale club, and the city did not want another big box. We wanted, we were feeling a lot of pressure to try to create a home downtown on Main Street. So we bought it to more or less have control of it, and then we sold it to developers that had the type of developments that we thought would best suit the area. Well, and we had, by the way, excess tax increment funds pooled to make that happen.
Sure.
Well, we sold those properties for much more than we purchased it. So those land sales, by the way, ended up funding the Economic Development Fund. So we had these sales coming in, and we basically approached the council and said, you know what, it'd be great to have a fund, have some funds available to do different things, whether it's supporting an infrastructure project that helps a development, maybe helping a business that might need to move, but we want to retain them. They've got a lot of jobs.
Sure.
And so we created that, and the funding from that really came from these real estate deals. I just touched on a couple, but there were many. There was probably 7 or 8.
Well, we still have that fund today. We talk about it every year. It's similar to, you have a water fund and a sewer fund and a liquor fund. It's somewhat of an enterprise fund, and as you said, that began with proceeds from land sales, one-time dollars to be used on one-time projects, not in any way tied to our tax levy or general fund. So and today, I think if you drive down Singletree right now, it's under construction. There's a lot of improvements on Singletree, and that's a mix of some money that we got from the businesses that are there and some economic development money, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So, no, the fund is still going strong, and there's not a lot of land sales because most of them were fairly unique kind of circumstances. You have a police headquarters you're selling, you got a residual piece of property here or there. Cities aren't typically in the business of selling property.
Right.
But we did other real estate deals too where we were buying property. So we needed a fire station number 4 to serve Southwest Eden Prairie.
Dell Road 212.
Exactly. So I got involved with that because they had a deal on another property. It fell through, and they were just, okay, we got to move on this. So that was a big deal. We bought that property, built the fire station, and we sold the residual to MnDOT. They needed some property, and then also to New Horizon Daycare, which is there today.
Yeah, and we're, like you said, we're not in the real estate business to be in the real estate business. We're in the economic development business.
Exactly.
And what you said earlier is so much of what happens the market takes care of, but sometimes the city could help with kind of steering in different directions or zoning. There are many other platforms
it was
to
always
get
clear,
a desired
It was
result.
always clear from the get-go that we believe you let the marketplace kind of do its thing, but sometimes you have to help guide it. And the council never wanted to be in the development business as a city. But if we could help facilitate the kind of development that we felt was most appropriate for like that area of Singletree, let's do it.
So when it comes to real estate development, I mean, we for many, many years were the home of the Minnesota Vikings.
We were. That was sad.
So
we've
dealt. I mean, you and I dealt with what Winter Park leaving, and there's a great opportunity. Yeah. There's a great opportunity at that site, but you had a history with the team and possibly the stadium even coming here at one time, right?
We did, yeah. So back in 2003, maybe back up a little bit further, Best Buy Corporation's world headquarters was in Eden Prairie for many years. And they, kind of long story short, ended up moving to Richfield. They needed to consolidate their campus. They were trying to make it work in Eden Prairie, and it didn't work out, so they left. And they left a large building and about 40 acres kind of just sitting there. And large buildings, this is a 350,000 square foot building, are hard to sell and fill with other people. So, and at that particular time in the marketplace, things were kind of rough too. So it sat there, and the city was frustrated. The owners were frustrated. And I'm not going to take credit for this myself, but I think it really came from a conversation that Pat Mulqueeny at the Chamber and I had of, what about the Vikings? What about a stadium? Because they were the Vikings had already been working for years and trying to get a new stadium. And it wasn't a crazy idea because we sat there and thought, okay, games are on Sunday. You've got all this parking up in our Golden Triangle Business Park that's available and empty on weekends. So you wouldn't necessarily have to build a lot of new parking. And a lot of the season ticket holders are down in this part of the metro area, so that's good. We felt we had adequate infrastructure to handle all the traffic and parking. There were future projects being planned, like the 169, 494 interchange that we know would help. So yeah, we started talking about it, and we discussed it with our council, and then the business community got involved, and everyone, yeah, let's do this.
Sure.
So Tim Pawlenty, who was the governor at the time, kind of formalized a process where he said, okay, cities, submit a proposal if you have a site for a stadium. We did, but the thing we didn't do, and let me back up. So before we even thought about submitting a proposal, Roy Terwilliger, who was the chair of the Metropolitan Sports Facilities Commission, basically said, this is great you guys are doing this, but I want to introduce you to some people. Bill Lester, who basically ran the Metropolitan Sports Facilities Commission, his whole career is about stadiums, and his staff, I'm going to get a meeting together, and you guys are going to hear about the realities of this, what you're getting into here. So we met at the Wilson Ridge office building on the 9th floor, so you can see the whole Best Buy site. It was really cool. And they basically told us, and they said, the host cities aren't always benefiting a lot from 10 events a year. So just have both eyes open. Mm-hmm. And we think you should talk to these consultants and have them do a little bit of Stadium 101 with you so you understand the economics. And we did that.
Okay.
And then they said, and by the way, the Twins are looking for a stadium too, and it might be worth a phone call. So I called this guy named Dave St. Peter. I didn't even know who he was. Okay. And he worked, Jerry Bell was actually the president of the Twins.
Right.
Well, I don't know, maybe Dave was the president, he was the chairman. And I was nervous. I remember calling him, and I was like, okay, we have this site, maybe the Twins should look at it. They were here the next day.
Wow.
We had a meeting in the collaboration room the next day. So they were very serious, and I wasn't sure how serious they actually were about that site or Eden Prairie, or just looking for some leverage to get a better deal.
Well, that's a lot more than 10 games a year, too.
That is absolutely. It's 84 games a year, and the economics were fantastic in terms of what people spend outside the stadium. So then we were talking about a Twin stadium, a Vikings and Twin stadium together. And there's actually, I could show you concept plans where they actually laid out on 50 acres. So it at the end of the day, it didn't work out. The Twins have a downtown solution, and that was that was the right solution. We got involved in this process that the governor set up, and basically what we discovered is they expect us to help finance it. And the city of Eden Prairie said, no, we think we have a site. We think we have the infrastructure. We aren't going to we shouldn't finance a stadium. This should be metro, statewide, whatever. We have some ideas on how you could do it.
Right.
But and then we had Anoka County saying, yeah, we'll help fund it. And so that's where kind of the momentum kind of went towards Anoka County, but as we know, that didn't work out anyway.
Back down.
But what it did do, and this was a sneaky little strategic plan of ours all along, that property sold like the next day. In other words, a lot of people in the real estate industry all of a sudden paid attention to it, and
it wasn't vacant for long.
It wasn't vacant for long after that.
So
anyway,
and I think that's the case.
That's some folklore for you.
I think you and I and others get nervous when large office buildings possibly become vacant and people move, because there's a lot of exposure with that. There's not that many companies that are going to take 300,000-400,000 square feet. We've had a couple where even recently, with Tenant moving in where Element, former GE Fleet Capital was, Blue Stem is where Super Value was, where Best Buy was.
No, they are.
So it happens.
It happens, and they could be very challenging. So no, we're very fortunate. This recent deal with Tenant moving into Pres Home or the Elements building. So yeah, that was very good.
So and then like I said at the outset, the Vikings are now in Egan, but that's and there's a current lease of the site with Lifetime, and that's a good interim use. But at some point in time, there could be some really positive development right there on 494 at the former Winter Park site. So we see that at some time.
Yeah.
That's a project.
Think about that. It's right on Main and Main, 2 freeways, great visibility. It's got huge potential. And, the Vikings came in and they were kind of in a hurry to maybe redevelop it. And then they realized after they got into some discussions with the city and we started offering some other ideas that maybe we should slow down. We'll do this short-term lease with Lifetime. We're really busy in Egan. and then we'll come back and try to come up with a more thoughtful plan. But no, one of the things Eden Prairie doesn't have is a full-service hotel, and you know that, Rick.
Right.
We talk about it a lot.
Yep.
We have 13 hotels with this one under construction, Hampton Inn, but they're all extended stays, select service, limited service, which are good. They
Not
serve
convention, banquet.
No, we'd have no meeting space, and that's
Right.
when I say full service, that's really what we're talking about. So could that be a good site, the Vikings? Yeah, I do. I think it could be. So that's one of the things that we introduced to the Wolves to consider. They built a conference center at Viking Lakes in Egan as part of the development, so now they have some experience. So we'll see. We'll keep
we
working
will.
on that.
We will. No, I think that most of our land is taken.
Yeah.
So 95% of what we work on is what gets torn down and what replaces that.
Yep.
Shields.
Yep.
Sears becomes Shields.
It's fantastic. We were so fortunate that happened because malls across the country are really feeling the pain of internet sales, and that Sears unfortunately did not do well for many years. And I think this Shields project is going to rock, and it's going to really stimulate kind of the whole area around the mall and the mall itself. And it's probably not the last department store that we'll see, perhaps close or change.
Yeah.
I think the mall, which really at the end of the day kind of serves as Eden Prairie's downtown area at 1.3 million square feet, I think will diversify. We're going to see, I think, other uses besides retail, and I think that's what it's going to take to keep them successful and relevant.
Yeah.
I think people are always going to want to shop. I really do. Not just online. I think people still want to go to stores.
Right. Well, it's also dining and entertainment.
Exactly.
And so we have that. And the AMC had a big upgrade, restaurants. So do you see, speaking of our mall, some of that development occurring around our mall that you're seeing at Southdale and Ridgedale? You're seeing housing filling in?
I do.
Okay.
I do. In fact, my choice would be that it's physically attached to the mall. I think there's more synergy and better value, like if you built a hotel and it was actually attached to the mall, so that year-round in our wild climate, you could just walk into entertainment, food, retail. It's just that they almost belong together. Housing, too, you could say the same thing. I mean, if you had an apartment project connected to the mall, I mean, look at the advantages in so many ways. But no, there's a lot of other uses that could supplant some of the retail and maybe actually support the retail better. And could we do the perimeter development like Southdale's doing? Yeah, we could, and we likely will at some point. But I would hope the mall owners would first look at, do we have an opportunity to physically attach some of those uses to our existing space?
Okay.
I think that would be best.
Okay. And then when we think about the future, there's some of that development you're talking about, and then transit-oriented development, right?
Yeah, I mean, light rail. I mean, this is kind of fun because it made me think back to all the things I've worked on, and I've done a lot of things. But I have to say the most challenging and exciting and exhilarating project has been the light rail. It's taken 10 years. I mean, really, I remember when I first started, probably the early 90s, I got sent to a movie. I got sent to a meeting in Hopkins to talk about light rail. And I remember just I was there, I had no clue. And I mean, those discussions go way back. When
you were in high school.
Well, really, I mean, the county was, Hennepin County bought, they bought the old rail corridor, and so they had been thinking about it for a long time. But it's happening. It's been a long road to actually get the thing approved and funded, and we as a city had a lot of work to do, probably more than any other city, because the alignment wasn't clear. There was no town center station. We had to make that work. I mean, you got to try to get it right because this thing's going to be around for probably 100 years, and so it was critical that we had to stop by the mall or kind of in our what we call our town center area, because that's where people work and that's where people shop, and to have another mode of transportation to help support those businesses is really good. And I'll say this, it's been very controversial, not everybody thinks it's the right thing to do. Most of those business owners that I talk to, which is all of them, I mean, I talked to all of them probably hundreds of times,
yeah,
they got it. They were like, yeah, at the end of the day, if there's another way to move people to my business, to and from my employees, whatever, it's probably a good thing. But now, of course, the next question is, how is it going to impact my parking? What's construction going to look like? And we had to sort through all that. But at the end of the day, I think it's going to make Eden Prairie more competitive than the communities that don't have it. because at the end of the day, from the economic development manager standpoint, mobility is almost everything. You know what I mean? It's the foundation of all development. You got to be able to move people and goods. And so, is it a panacea? No, it's not going to fix everything, but it's going to move probably 30, 40,000 people a day, and it's
right.
It'll be huge.
Well, I think all modes of transportation are important. The Southwest Transit operation will still be in play. Light rail. Yep. Transportation, I think the number one issue, again, the number one concern in our resident survey this past year was traffic and traffic congestion.
Yep.
And getting around.
Yep.
And not really within the city, but from city to city. And this is one of those options. But you also worked on 494 and 169.
I did. You know, I'm a supporter of all forms of transportation, but there's no question roads and bridges they're number one. There's just no question about it. They move the most people. We can't give up on it. We need more capacity. And I've been involved in these discussions. I've been on the I-494 Corridor Commission since 1987. You know, the biggest challenge is just finding the revenue to support, transportation expansion. It's expensive, and it's expensive whether it's a road or whether it's light rail. I do drive by with some pride frequently the 169 494 interchange, because that was a very, very challenging project. Cobbling together $150 million is never easy.
No.
And that's really at the end of the day. But what was so much fun about that project was it was a great collaboration between Eden Prairie, Edina, and Bloomington, and MnDOT. And I remember the first meeting we got with the commissioner. We went down, the commissioner of MnDOT, we went down, and he basically said, this is a priority. We're going to make this happen. I'm committed, my staff, to start meeting with you on a regular basis, and we're going to figure this out. And so we started having monthly meetings here at Eden Prairie, and the mayor and the staff of each city would show up at these meetings. We'd have sometimes 2 council members and our mayor, because it was very important, and legislators. Sure. Jennifer Loon. We'd have 30 people around the table, and we sat there. We weren't sitting on our hands. It took us about a year and a half to figure it out, but we at the end of the day, we came up with the money to build that interchange. At the time, there were signals, there was congestion, people were backed up onto 494, and there were some fatalities because they were getting rear-ended. This was really needed.
People forget how this wasn't that long ago. You were sitting up there at a stoplight wanting to get across the Minnesota River on 169.
And I don't have time to get into the details, but it was very challenging on all fronts. The federal
do you have a meeting or something coming up? You don't have time?
Well, do you want to make this an hour event?
No, it'll be edited. But
well, we had the Federal Highway Administration, who's the only way it was really going to work for MnDOT with it's $150 million isn't the exact number, but it's in that ballpark. They were going to leave one major leg of the turning movement out of the project because they didn't think we needed it. That was not something that the Federal Highway Administration ever gives approval for. They did, and it was not easy. We had to get a congressman involved. There were meetings in Washington. Jim Hovland, the mayor of Edina, was amazing. He also chaired the Transportation Advisory Board. We needed $30 more million. He got it from them, and I watched those meetings. I was down there. It was just incredible. You think about that's a group of representatives from all around the metro area. They all have needs,
right?
But
that's
huge project.
Yeah, and now it's going to be head further east, 35W 494. You're on the 494 Corridor Commission.
Yeah,
coalition.
And some people ask me, why are you involved in these highway projects? And I'll tell you why. Really, it's probably obvious, but
the girls.
But
the girls.
There are no girls.
The girls don't come rushing into the meeting. Girls don't rush the meeting table. That's just okay.
No,
all right.
They don't. But
right.
Since you've been here, how many meet and greets have we done?
We've done a lot.
We've been meeting with CEOs through this meet and greet program since 2003. The number one theme that came out of those meetings was do something with these highways. We need more capacity on 494. I mean, that's why the mayor would always look at me and say, we need to be more aggressively pursuing solutions to that problem. And so, again, economic development, that ended up being a big focus of my career the last 15 years.
No, it
Finding the funding to make these projects happen, because it's challenging.
Yeah.
It's very challenging. But it's rewarding, too, when you get a new bridge. I get off on bridges. I mean,
yeah, we've got a lot of them. There are a lot of them in Eden Prairie.
Going, look at that bridge. And my wife, she's like, yeah, it's a bridge. Yeah, but did you see how cool it was and all the different things, the lights and all the things we spent time on? And she's like, once they really pay attention, they go, yeah, that's pretty neat.
We've gotten really positive comments on the Shady Oak Bridge.
Oh,
and
yeah,
then again,
wonderful.
I mean, that was 212 Shady Oak Bridge and redoing Shady Oak Road. A lot of positive comments from all those businesses in and around that area. And then we're bringing
sure.
Optum, the Optum campus. So
Exactly.
it's a real positive thing.
So, setting the stage for more growth is really what it's about. I mean, that Shady Oak Bridge you mentioned, I mean, we were fortunate to get a $7 million grant from the state of Minnesota through the Transportation for Economic Development, TED program. And really that program is, MnDOT says, we're going to pull some money aside. If you have a project that clearly is going to support job growth, we'll fund it. Mm-hmm. Well, that was a $35 million bridge, but that $7 million was huge in helping that happen.
It helped.
It
made it happen.
It did.
Yeah.
And so now, for the Golden Triangle, which I think is going to have a bright future, I mean, a lot of that development is 70s and 80s, single-story office warehouse, industrial warehouse. That there's going to be pressure for that to redevelop at higher densities. That creates more traffic. We have to figure that out. Well, that's one of the reasons we were really behind 169, 494, the new Washington Avenue Bridge, the Shady Oak Bridge expansion. I mean, we got a grant to do a little expansion at Valley View Road and Prairie Center Drive. Again, it's to kind of set the stage so that if someone comes in and says, we're going to acquire 15 acres of existing buildings, we're going to scrape them and we're going to put up higher density office, or we want to be able to say yes.
And we can accommodate it.
And we can accommodate it.
Sewer, water, traffic flow. Well, it goes back to when you started, back in the 80s. You were forecasting growth, and it might have been related to mostly new development, but we're still forecasting growth.
Exactly.
I think there was a time where we were going to be a city of 100,000 people, but now it's 120.
Yeah.
And that's not the case anymore. No. It's more in the 80s, but still you've got a lot of people that work in the city, and as you said, maybe more density coming in the Golden Triangle. Yeah. And we always tell people, too, there might be more density around the rail areas, the commercial areas, but the reason we're not going to be 120,000 people is all those single-family homes and all the neighborhoods along the Minnesota River and Purgatory, those are not going to be replaced with high-rise homes or apartment buildings per se. So that kind of keeps the population close to where we are now.
Right.
But you're right. There's areas around the mall, the Golden Triangle. So you'll be working on that.
Oh, I hope so. Yeah. It's still fun.
I
never did jump ship to the private sector. It's
no, you
too
did.
much fun.
You did.
And the other thing that I do pinch myself every now and then, because it's not that often, because people are like, you've been there 33 years. And I'm like, I know, but you know what? It's rewarding to say, not to say it, it's rewarding to have been part of building a community.
Yeah. No,
I mean, my fingerprints are, I'm not the guy, but I was involved in a lot of those projects, and it's been a blast.
It's great to see, right?
Yeah,
in the city you live in and
my
grew
kids
up
grew
in.
up here, went to school here. It's like, it's a great community.
And you went to school, got an education, got a job, but you still play.
I do.
Still play in the band.
I was able to get the best of both worlds. I don't have to be in the smoky bar night after night.
No.
Instead, I play at like Prairie Brewfest out in the bucolic park,
Starring Lake Amphitheater. You're cheap talent for us. we appreciate. So you're
cheap. That doesn't sound that great, but yeah, I'll go with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So what kind of the music that you were playing? Then you're doing covers. All along, you're always doing like 60s, 70s. What do you do?
Well, there's only one form of music. I mean, it was the best music ever came out of the 60s and 70s. It just did. I mean, that was the birth of rock and roll was in the 50s, but it really didn't innovate and become. I'm just kind of.
No, I know you're being. That's probably how you. It's an opinion. I understand.
Every generation loves the music of the generation, but we love the stuff we grew up with. So that's what we play, and what we find out, no matter where we play it. A lot of other people do too, including our kids and millennials.
Absolutely.
So we do a lot of 60s, 70s, 80s.
So what's your favorite stuff?
Well, I'm a huge Eric Clapton fan. I mean, that's why I started playing guitar. But we do Clapton, Derek and the Dominoes, Beatles, Van Morrison, The Doors. A lot of different stuff. And we've got a young 28-year-old singer that's brought a little kind of a little youth movement to our band.
Okay.
And it inspired us to try to do some newer stuff too. So yeah, it's fun. It's a nice little hobby.
It's a good hobby. It doesn't
Get
pay
me
all
too
the
much trouble.
bills.
The girls aren't showing up like they used to, but that's all right.
That's okay. That's not why you. It's why you started.
No.
But it's not why you
doing
keep
it. I'm doing it for the money.
Well, we appreciate it.
And that's why I'm starving. That's why I'm so thin. No, I'm kidding.
Well, Dave, I appreciate you coming in.
Oh, we're done? I thought we had
we're done. We're done.
I thought that was the preamble. That was the introduction.
You said I've got something else. I don't have enough time for this. No.
Geez. All right. That's okay.
An hour. We want people to listen to this. If it's kind of in that 40 to 50 minute range, actually, someone could listen to that on.
Hopefully they'll listen to more than 5 minutes of this one.
Well, they will. And then if they've got like a commute to work and it's not too congested, that they could probably get it in on the way to and from work in less than an hour.
That'd be a perfect time to listen to your podcast. Hey, congrats! I don't know what number I am, but you're rolling with this thing.
Your number, I think you're like number 18.
And I'm kind of hurt by that, but I'm okay with it.
Will you actually listen to one now? Will you go back and listen and see
you mean
how
not,
the others?
Not listen just to mine?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes,
because I brought you on just so you would listen to that.
Well, actually, I was protesting because I wasn't number one.
Now you'll listen.
Yes.
Thanks, Dave.
Yep.